so this reductionism and this thing, this mindset we've been stuck in since the medieval age. Do you think this is on purpose to divorce people from the magnitude of life outside just, what you were saying with people thinking it's more human-centric universe, or is it a byproduct of just bad teaching? Like, why do you think that's happening, and why are we stuck in it, in your opinion?
My answer to this might be a bit complex. I think that there's two ways to approach the Bible. And this isn't the Bible, this is my book, but let's say this is the Bible.
Right.
There's two ways that you can hold this book in your hand. Again, pretending this is the Bible, not my book. One way is you can hold it and revere it and engage with it as a relic, a holy relic. And from this interpretation, there are norms and traditions that must be followed, because this is what you're holding in your hand is a relic, right? And I struggle with a more comprehensive way to explain that. But on the other hand, you can approach the scriptures not as a relic, but as a message, as an integrated message system. And the primary purpose of the Bible is to convey a message, a series of messages, but specifically there's a primary message. And the primary message of the Bible, not the only message, but the primary message is the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Right.
That's the primary message. And that is the message. That's why when Jesus was walking on the road of Emmaus with those two gentlemen post-resurrection, after he resurrected from the dead, he was going through the scriptures with them, astounding them with his knowledge and wisdom and insight, and he was demonstrating to them how all of these things pertain to him.
Right. It all pointed towards
him, to Christ, to the Son of God.
Yep.
So I approach the scriptures as a integrated message system. And so I'm looking for the message. I want to get the memo. I want to discern the message and messages that are encrypted in this book. Again, pretending this is the Bible here. But if you approach it as a relic, in my mind, it's quite a different approach. You revere it, you take it as holy, and you are going to, in this view, lock yourself into particular traditional views, based on whatever doctrine you subscribe to, whatever denomination, rather, you subscribe to. I mean, fundamental evangelicals have very different doctrinal positions on things in the same book as Greek Orthodox Christians, or as Roman Catholics.
Yep.
And among Protestants, there are thousands of denominations. And everybody gets stuck on a particular thing, and then they build a stronghold. They build a habitation around particular doctrinal points, and they're approaching it like a relic.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is making sense to anybody, but this is how I see it in my mind. But rather, I am looking for the message. That's all I care about. And a good illustration of this is when Jesus of Nazareth, the Son of God, is walking in Judea. He's walking on earth and interacting with human beings. And according to the scriptures, according to the writers of the New Testament, the universe itself came into being through him.
Right.
That all things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things.
Right.
And in him all things consist. And he's walking in the flesh with us. He is literally the fulfillment of so much of the Old Testament. All of the things, even the artifacts of the temple and of the tabernacle point to him. The sacrifices and the feast days and all of that in the Old Testament, all of that very complicated ritualistic stuff. And this is one of the things, by the way, that distinguishes the Bible from other ancient documents, because other traditions have sacrifices and feast days and all of that. But in the Christian faith, all of those things are symbolic of a historical figure
Yeah.
who was the culmination of all of the symbolism, for the fulfillment of so much of the prophecy in the flesh, walking on earth. And he is engaging so much with the priest class, with the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the teachers of the law, who many of them would have committed much of the Old Testament to memory, and they couldn't recognize him.
Right. Yep.
They didn't get
They were
the memo.
blaspheming
They
God.
could not decrypt that folder. They could not decode the information correctly so that they could see the fulfillment and the culmination of that information standing in front of them, conversing with them, because they approached the scriptures as a relic,
Right.
and they did not receive the message.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is there's the school of thought that's a passive reading of the relic, and it's surface, but there's still a little more beneath the surface to that. But then there's also the active understanding of a relic and trying to decode a much deeper message that's in there beyond just.
You're looking for the message. It's an integrated message system. Now, if you walk away, I know that if someone takes the Bible and they read it and they walk away with any kind of message that is contrary to the gospel of Christ. And what is the gospel of Christ? It's exactly what Jesus declared when he walked on the earth. It's who he is and his mission and what he did. And then that gospel is reiterated by the apostles, that Jesus Christ came in the flesh, he died on the cross, he was buried, and then he was risen from the dead and ascended to the Father and so forth. If you walk away with any other message other than that, if you miss that message, then you've missed the entirety of the whole thing.
Oh yeah.
Like it has and in some ways, if you think about the Pharisees and Sadducees and teachers of the law, their lifetime pursuit of reading the scriptures and studying and memorizing amounted to nothing.
Right. I mean,
Nothing.
Look at because they're memorizing something like, we'll say, the Ten Commandments, and then on the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is expanding on what it means to murder. Right, like it's not just a static reading or surface level thing. There's he's saying, no, it's not just that. It's like what's in your heart and stuff like that. And I
say it meant nothing. It meant nothing to them in the final equation because they didn't get the message.
Right.
So they understood the feast days and they understood and they understood all of the traditions of the Jews and they understood all of the artifacts in the temple and all of the traditions and all of the prophets. They understood all of it and revered it.
Yep.
From the perspective of a Jew, but they missed the very Son of God standing in their midst. They could not recognize him.
Right.
And so that's why when I say I approach the Bible as an integrated message, I'm looking for that communication from God outside of time, for all time, to mankind. And the Bible doesn't just address mankind, by the way. There are many verses that seem to be addressing members of the elder race as well. So that would be the distinction. And I don't know if that makes sense to people, but I don't view the Bible as a relic. I view it as a message, as an integrated message system. So I'm looking for the message.
Right.
And I think when you approach the Bible that way, first and foremost, if you do so honestly, and you do so in an unbiased way, you are going to receive the message of the gospel of Christ, and it is going to wreck your heart.
Right.
That's what it does. It's going to hit you like a hammer because it is so profound, and the narrative is crafted in such an ingenious way that by the time you get to Jesus of Nazareth, the fulfillment of all those things pertaining to him is spectacular. It's fulfilled in a spectacular way, and it becomes very powerfully convincing to someone who reads the Bible from a very honest, open, and unbiased way.
Oh yeah, it's the greatest collection of stories ever written. And every time I could reread something, every time I reread it, I'm seeing something new. It's unbelievable. So to shift gears a bit, I'm kind of thinking about that spectrum you created, the things that may or may not populate this earth. Where do demons fall in on this earth for you?
So when we talk about specific, when we want to start to categorize, when we're looking at the taxonomy of beings in the biblical narrative, we run into two problems here. Well, we run into a primary problem. We do it most often from a Western perspective. We're going back to that reductionism and that medieval perspective.
Yep.
And we're dealing with symbols and words that we don't understand.
Right.
But so in order to, if we're going to say what is a demon, for example, in order to answer that question correctly in context, you have to go back to the traditions of the Hebrews. And if you answer that question there, it becomes very specific. Whereas in the West, we take the term demon and it's very amorphous. It's an ambiguous term.
Oh, yeah.
It pretty much refers to anything that is what we would say demonic, anything that's grotesque or scary or menacing, demonic. Something we don't understand, vampires and boogeymen and gnomes and whatever else kind of creatures existed in the medieval mind back back during those times. We still hold on to that for whatever reason. That's our Western perspective of what a demon is. But if you drill down in the text, in the biblical text, and you inquire what specifically is a demon to the Hebrew mind. What is a demon? You get a very high resolution specific answer. And so when people ask me about demons and what about demons and aliens and whatever, the only answer that I can give is to resort to this refined understanding of these terms in the narrative. Mm-hmm. So a demon, according to within the realm of Hebrew cosmology, a demon is a very specific thing. In the New Testament, let's start there first, it's what's called an unclean spirit. It's the possessing spirit that inhabits the bodies of human beings. These are the ones that Jesus is encountering. They're foaming from the mouth. They're having epileptic fits.
Legion.
And so forth. They're uncontrollable. They're feral.
Yep.
Now, that itself has an origin, and the origin of this phenomenon, demon possession, goes back to an extra biblical text called the Book of Enoch, specifically First Enoch, because you're not going to find the origin of those things in the Hebrew Old Testament. But you're going to find references to First Enoch mm-hmm. in the Bible. I would say definitely in the New Testament, and I would also say in the Old Testament, like Genesis 6, which are making reference to this other manuscript that existed, certainly story that existed among the ancient Hebrews, namely the Enochian tale, which describes a scenario in which a renegade group of watchers of these angelic beings descend to the earth in defiance of God. They descend specifically on the summit of Mount Hermon. They choose wives for themselves from among the daughters of men. They copulate with these women who conceive and give birth to giants.
Yep.
So you have this non-human species, these watchers who are mating with a human species, specifically these human women, and they are progenerating a race of hybrid giants, beings that are not fully human or fully angelic. They're somewhere in between. They're an unsanctioned hybrid race. Mm-hmm. And in the narrative of Enoch, First Enoch, specifically in the Book of the Watchers, at the end of that story, you have God is pronouncing judgment over the Watchers. He's pronouncing judgment over the Watchers and over their offspring, the Nephilim. Yep. And as part of the judgment over the Nephilim, they are condemned to a very unnatural condition. It's a curse that's placed on them. And the curse is, it's a situation in which when the Nephilim die in the post-flood context, pre-flood context rather, when they died, their spirits, their souls would persist in the world as vagabond wraiths. In other words, they would be disembodied spirits that would continue to live in this unnatural, torturous state, because they would have all of the desires of the flesh, but no flesh with which to fulfill those desires. They would be hungry and thirsty and ravenous, probably have all of the same sexual impulses, all of the desires of the flesh, but without any flesh with which to fulfill, through which to fulfill those desires. That's the curse of the Nephilim.
Yeah.
And in fact, in Enoch, in the pronouncement, in this judgment, it's said to them, you will be called evil spirits on the earth. Evil spirits have proceeded from your bodies, and you will be called evil spirits or unclean spirits on the earth. Again, with all of the desires of the flesh, but with no flesh through which to fulfill these desires. So what do these evil spirits seek? Bodies. They seek bodies to inhabit so that they can inhabit flesh, and through that flesh attempt to satiate the desires of the flesh that they're still strapped with, and as a result of this curse. So you find these this is a very specific categorization of entities in the biblical context, in Hebrew cosmology. Demons specifically refer to these unclean spirits, to these disembodied spirits that came from the Nephilim in the pre-flood world, that proceeded from the dead Nephilim, the dead giants. As crazy as that sounds, as fantastical as that sounds, that is what the demons were. Right. They weren't just whatever grotesque thing, whatever kind of scary, spooky thing. Those weren't demons in the Hebrew cosmology. So that's why when people ask me, for example, the question that I think I can probably anticipate, are aliens demons? And I get this question all the time. Well, that's a difficult question to answer. Well, I can answer it very definitively, no. But it's a difficult question to answer in a way that's understandable to people coming from a Western Christian view, because we think demons are just whatever.
Right. Like it's a catch-all phrase for
whatever menacing, grotesque creature, fairy tale creature. That's all demons. And the alien seems to fit that category. Therefore, aliens are demons. Well, that's not true. And when you do that, when you categorize like a gray alien in that way, what you do is you've robbed yourself of any deeper understanding of what this creature might be.
Right. It goes against what you're saying
and
about...
you're being inaccurate also in regard to the Hebrew cosmology, because like a gray alien specifically doesn't have any of the attributes of a disembodied spirit. In fact, it's antithetical in regard to its characteristics, its personality traits, if we can call them that. It's totally antithetical, the opposite of what demons are in the New Testament.